Hello, it's Friday, the 22nd of November, and I have got legendary comedian, cultural commentator, I'll call him, the great Greg Proops joins me today. Very, very excited to have him here. We had a great conversation. If you want to jump to it, it begins at 31 minutes. But I do have a few things to share up top, a little bit of an abbreviated version of the show because I'm getting it up so late. Well, the reason for that is because I was hanging out with you. And then after the hangout, at 11:45 p.m. East, I went on CNN with my friend Laura Coates and Carrie Champion. So it was a late night. We had almost 80 people at our hangout last night. If you missed it, come to the Monday hangout. We'll do Monday and Thursday for the next, foreseeable future, as long as I can sustain it. If I can't do one of them, then I'll let you know. I can't do it. But I hope to host a hangout every Monday and Thursday at 8 p.m. so that we can invest and grow this community and just feel like we're not alone in these crazy times that we live in. So join me there, and if you miss it, the next day I'll release a link to it in the subscriber email. So if you're not signed up, patreon.com/Pete Dominic. I cannot do it without you. Today's show sponsored by Slate Hill Edible Farms in upstate New York. Kevin Richburg can grow anything, help you grow anything. You should buy his honey and you will live forever. That's right. Eternal honey. Get it now. And check out Slate Hill Edible Farms. Hopefully we'll all meet up there later next year in the summer. We are talking about having a gathering there as well as in Vegas at the end of March. Pod Jam still on, working on the details right now. Well, let's get to what I've got for you today. On tap today, the new format for the show, at least temporarily. I'm really enjoying it. And so is Dan Perry, who emailed me and said, Pete, enjoying the new format. We need to count our blessings. Then some good news, then some education. That's what you're doing. Great job, Alaska Dan. That's right, Dan. Thank you very much. I open now with the good stuff, which is hope, happy, inspiring clips and comments and quotes. And then I get to the news and headlines, which is mostly not as happy, although there are some obviously good news stories that I can share with you each and every day and some clips as well. And then I get to the interview, and almost everybody is loving the new format. I finally did get one note that wasn't so positive from Carl W., who says, Pete, on the new format, I love the show. I've listened since the serious days, and I don't want to yum anyone's yuck, but I'm not digging the good stuff segment. Could you add a time marker for when the news segment starts? Thanks for all you do for this community. Carl, no problem at all. I really do want to give people something that they can look forward to listen to, that they want to listen to. And if I give you these kind of three choices, the good stuff, the news and headlines, and the interview, you can choose. I'd love to be able to release it so that you could just press play on any of the three segments that you like, or just one button for all of it. I'm trying to figure that out. But right now, yeah, I'll tell you when the news and headline starts at about 12 minutes and 35 seconds. How about that kind of service for you, Carl? That's right. Each and every day I'll start this podcast, and you have something to look forward to with positivity, helpful resources, ideas, quotes for how to live a better life with less suffering and more joy, especially when we head into the darkness this time of year and as a country with Trump coming back into office, which inspired all of this. I'm including my daily practice right here on the show. What I'm learning each and every day, I want to try to share with you and then relearn myself and drill it into my stupid brain so that I can remember it and not have these long or even brief spirals in my life and just find overall joy, less stress, more happiness, all of it. That's what I'm looking for. That's what the good stuff's effort is to bring me and all of you. So let's do it. And I'm going to start with this audio of Will Reeve, who of course is Christopher Reeve's and Dana Reeve's son. He lost both of his parents within 3 years of each other. First his legendary father, and then his mother a couple of years later of lung cancer. So he sat down with Anderson Cooper, and I think this segment I'm about to share with you, it's really hard to hear. Brace yourself. But then I think it just turns inspiring and specific in terms of how to deal with grief, which is something I absolutely want to try to grapple with here in the good stuff, because it helps us. It really does. And this moment and whole interview, I think, will help us. Here it is.
Injured right before my third birthday. So I got about 9-ish years with him in a wheelchair. But the love that my dad showed me in the short time we had together has sustained me until present day and probably way beyond. And then he died a few months after my 12th birthday. I remember walking in to the hospital And the first thing I saw was my dad in a room with a bunch of doctors and nurses around him doing chest compressions. And someone took me into a room, and I could hear my mom next door in the room with my dad wailing. And then eventually she quietly walked in the room and told me that he was gone and that I should come with her and walk in and say anything that I might want to say to him. And she said, he can still hear you. I remember saying, Dad, I love you. And I will always do whatever I can to make you proud. And then I walked out into the waiting room of all my family, and thus began a great long journey into grief. A little over a year later, my mom dies. Didn't smoke. I don't think she drank much. And yet there she is with lung cancer. And then March of 2006, she died. I didn't want to face it. That's so final. I might have been young, but I wasn't too young to know how catastrophic that could be. That was the low moment of my life so far.
Did you grieve?
No, I learned pretty quickly that whenever I didn't seem like I was grieving, people remarked how strong and adjusted and tough, etc. I was. The stronger and happier I seemed, the better I was received by the world around me.
People like to see that.
Yeah. It makes them feel comfortable and safe.
Yeah.
Grief is weird and scary and a little yucky, right? Part of what I've learned as I've tried to wrestle my own grief down to size and understand it better and have it serve me rather than fight me is you need to push on the pain points. You need to work at it. You go to the gym to get strong. You read books to get smart. You got to go to the dark places in your own way in order to bring light there. The one thing that will be destructive is if you ignore it and pretend it doesn't exist. The wound will be there. The hole is there, whatever you want to call it, however you want to identify it. It's permanent. But that is okay because you can heal there and you can live a full, meaningful life with the wound.
Wow. Just wow. Will Reeve. Very, very intelligent and well put and well framed and coming from someone who should know. I think it's fair to say, losing both his parents by the time he was 15. Damn. I really appreciated that. I hope you appreciated that look at grief and that way to handle it. Push on the pain points. You've got to get to where the darkness is to arrive with more light. So well said. I hope you appreciated that as much as I did. Okay. Wow. It's hard to make a pivot from that. Let me try this, shall I? I mean, I've got to keep talking. It's a podcast. I can't just take a long moment to ponder and think about what we just heard from that very wise young man. But unless you want, you could stop and start writing something or share that with a friend, I suppose. But I mean, I've got to keep going. I'm going to keep going, if you don't mind. I've got something that I want to read to you. This is the foreword to the book, You Can Be Happy No Matter What, 5 Principles for Keeping Life in Perspective. My friend Dr. Aaron Carroll is one of the smartest people I've ever met in my life, suggested this book to me years ago. It said he swears by it. And in the foreword to this book by Richard Carlson, Dr. Wayne Dyer writes something I think is worth sharing. He says, many people mistakenly believe that circumstances make a person. They don't. Instead, they reveal him or her. Our circumstances don't define us. They represent our unique curriculum, our tests, challenges, and opportunities for personal growth, acceptance, and detachment. Our success as a human being does not lie in our collections of possessions or accomplishments. It does not lie in the details of our predicament, but in how we deal with what we have and how we face our challenges, how we transform our unique curriculum into growth and into a life filled with love. Ooh, I really like that. I really like what he's saying there. Let me continue. We have the real capacity to manifest our own destiny, to create real magic in our lives, to make our lives an expression of divinity, to remove ego from our consciousness, and to make our love our top priority. To do these things, however, it's essential that we create inner balance, a sense of harmony and equanimity within. Happiness is not the end of the road, it's the beginning. Contentment enhances our spiritual life. Then Wayne Dyer says that this book that I'm telling you about explains that life is not your enemy, but your thinking can be. He reminds us that our minds are very powerful tools that can work for us or against us at any given moment. We have a choice. We can learn to flow with life with loving and patient acceptance, or we can struggle against it. I've said many times that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. We have the capacity to make this human experience all it can be. We have within us the resources to live a happy, fulfilled life, regardless of the challenges we face. And then he says, read the book, because, like I said, it's 5 principles for keeping life in perspective. It's real good. Those principles, by the way, just a quick review of them, are the principle of thought, of moods, of separate realities, of feelings, and of the present moment. I highly recommend You Can Be Happy No Matter What by Richard Carlson, but there you go. That's the foreword by Wayne Dyer. And you know what? I love that Wayne Dyer. Not everything that he's written do I subscribe to, but a lot of it I do. And here's an oldie but a goodie.
You live your life inside, and it isn't what people do to you, it's how you react to what people do to you that makes the difference between you being a fully functioning person or a victim. That's the way it is in life.
But how do you not feel bad when bad things happen?
Well, if feeling bad when bad things happen is going to improve the quality of your life, then I would be here on the show saying, let's teach people to feel bad.
Yeah.
Okay? It's like when bad things happen out there, you can either get a lesson from it. There are no accidents to me in a perfect universe. There are only lessons. Everything that happens is a lesson, and you either learn from it or you will become a victim of it.
Either learn from it or become a victim of it. Do you subscribe to that? Sounds good to me. I'd rather not be a victim. So I hope to learn from it and from you. All right. Well, that's Wayne Dyer, and that's the good stuff for today. Like I said, abbreviated version. Now I want to get to your headlines, clips, and my conversation with the legend, Greg Proops, which is so good. All right, as always, pretty much every time I like to start with international news, and it seems like one of the big stories yesterday was the International Criminal Court yesterday accused the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, and his former defense minister, Yoav Gallant, of war crimes related to Israel's conduct in Gaza. The court issued arrest warrants for both men, accusing them of using starvation as a weapon and intentionally attacking civilians. Netanyahu's office rejected what it called, quote, absurd and false accusations. He now faces the risk of arrest in any of the court's 124 member nations, including most European countries. The U.S., which is not a member of the court, said it rejects the decision, of course. The court has also issued a warrant for the arrest of Mohammed Daif, Hamas's military chief, accusing him of crimes against humanity. Israel said that it killed him in an airstrike, but the court said it could not determine if he was alive. I'm sure there would be other Hamas members that would be the International Criminal Court would be going after as well, but they're mostly dead. And staying overseas, yesterday, Russia's authoritarian autocratic leader Vladimir Putin announced that Russia's forces had struck a Ukrainian military facility with a new intermediate range ballistic missile that is mainly intended as nuclear deterrence. Putin said the attack was in response to Ukraine's recent use of American and British weapons to strike deeper into Russia. His comments made in a rare address to the nation appeared to be an ominous threat against Ukraine's Western allies, including the U.S. He said, "We consider ourselves entitled to use our weapons against the military facilities of those countries that allow their weapons to be used against our facilities." So that's not great. Not great at all. And now let's come home. The big news yesterday was that Matt Gaetz dropped his bid to be Attorney General. Donald Trump immediately tapped his replacement. It's El Chapo. That's right. The notorious drug lord who's in federal prison will be released to run the Department of Justice for Donald Trump. I kid, of course, he appointed Pam Bondi, the former Attorney General of Florida. But you know all the details about Matt Gaetz dropping out. By this point, The other big issue, though, of course, is that Pete Hegseth, is he next? Trump's choice for defense secretary, former military veteran, Gold Star winner, and TV guy. Really, I mean, he's been on Fox News for the past few years. A lot of controversy around allegations against Pete Hegseth, so that might be the one that is next. And I really don't want to waste my time talking about these guys who may or may not be confirmed by the U.S. Senate. So I am going to move on to a couple of other news stories. America's largest car manufacturers are strategizing on ways to convince the Trump administration not to scrap federal regulations that essentially force them to sell electric vehicles. Why? Well, they've invested billions in the transition to electric and are worried about being undercut by competitors who did not do that. So automakers want Trump to keep the EV regulations in place. Don't believe otherwise. Look into it. Read about it. Don't trust me. As always, read about any of these stories that I mentioned. What else do I have for you? In Illinois, the state Supreme Court overturned the conviction of Jussie Smollett's false hate crime claim. Do you care about that story? The Justice Department asked a federal court to force Google to sell its Chrome browser to break up its search monopoly. The first major atmospheric river of the season is parked now over Northern California, and we got snow for the first time here in New York, where I live in the Hudson Valley. Mark it down, November 22nd, first snowfall. Get those legs ready. Get time to get out on the mountain. That's what I'm telling myself. In Brazil, the country's federal police urged prosecutors to charge the former president over accusations he'd been involved in plotting a coup. How about that? Brazil did what we could not. We tried. We got close, but no cigar, we reelected him. Be better, Brazil, as Melania would say. The U.S. government has charged an Indian tycoon, who is one of the world's richest people, with multiple counts of fraud. And at the UN climate talks in Azerbaijan, the world's poorest countries, they decided the world's poorest countries have teamed up with China and India to demand $1.3 trillion in climate financing per year from Western countries. Very interesting developments there. I should probably get a guest on to recap it all. Conservatives in Florida are targeting what they describe as liberal indoctrination in colleges by removing subjects like sociology from core requirements. Read about it at the New York Times. And this, for 7 straight months, drug fatalities have been declining. Changing in the drug supply may be one cause, but there are others, and experts are trying to figure it out. But that's good news. Also, astronomers took the first close-up picture of a star in another galaxy. Apparently, it looks like the star is getting ready to explode, but that's an interesting story in science and space. Those are the headlines that I've got for you here on the Friday show. Now, it's time for the clips. What have I got for you? I guess I could have played this one in the earlier segment because I think it is kind of good advice to think about, but I like this Scott Galloway character, Professor Scott Galloway. Some things he says really pisses me off, but a lot of things he says and the way he says them, if they're right, make me think a lot. I think he makes really good points about men and boys, and he's picking up on the research of Richard Reeves, Ruth Whitman, and others. Here he is on The View talking about the struggle of young men and why it matters.
No cohort that has fallen further faster than young men. 4 times more likely to kill themselves, 3 times more likely to be addicted, 12 times more likely to be incarcerated. And because of the advantage that I received as a white heterosexual male and my father received, we have a lack of empathy for them. 1 out of 3 men under the age of 30 hasn't had sex in the last year. And we have the deepest resourced, most talented people in the world trying to give young men a false impression that they can have a reasonable facsimile of life on a screen and with an algorithm. They're not going out. They're not getting a plan. They don't have the confidence to approach strangers for mentorship, for friendship. They're not getting jobs. And I hear from mothers and I hear from women. You know who wants more economically and emotionally viable men? Women.
Yeah.
Women.
Yeah.
And unless we have more empathy is not a zero-sum game. Civil rights did not hurt white people. Gay marriage did not hurt heteronormative marriage. We have to look at the statistics and understand that our young men are failing. They are struggling. 4 times the suicide rate. 4 times. There are things we can do. This is a call out to all men. The single point of failure when a young boy comes off the tracks is when he loses a male role model. The ultimate expression of masculinity is for a man who is doing well. You don't have to be a baller just trying to live a virtuous life. Is to reach out and get involved in the life of a boy. If we want better men, we need to be better men.
Man, good stuff from Scott Galloway. I love that quite a bit. and thought it was very important and wanted to share that with you. And also wanted to share this with you. This is the first transgender person ever to be elected Congress, and a firestorm around her presence has already been started. Congress hasn't even started. She's not been sworn in, but she won in Delaware. I read her statement yesterday, I think, on the show, but here's 2 minutes of Sarah McBride sounding highly intelligent. I mean, put this up against Nancy Mace or Congress people on the right any day of the week. She's above it all. She's smarter, and she's trying to be practical and do what is in her constituents' best interest, which is not being concerned about trans people in the bathroom. I think that's fair to say, but maybe I'm missing the point. Here she is. I thought it was real good, and I think she's real impressive. Yesterday on Capitol Hill at a press conference, Sarah McBride for the first time on Stand Up.
Let's be clear. The party that was focused on culture wars, the party that was focused on trans people, was the Republican Party. It was Donald Trump. It was the $100 million, $200 million that they spent on television ads. But I want to be clear, I do not believe, from what I've seen in Delaware, that voters in my state were responding to those attacks. Delaware is in the Philadelphia media market, so we were seeing those ads that Donald Trump clearly prioritized and focused in with regard to the culture wars. What I was hearing from voters across the state of Delaware, my district is urban, suburban, and rural. It looks like America. And what I was hearing was not the ads that Donald Trump was putting on the air. What I was hearing from folks is the need to build an economy that works for everyone. What I was hearing was that the American dream is increasingly unaffordable and inaccessible. What I was hearing was that we need to guarantee affordable health care, housing, and child care for every person in this state and in this country. That's what I was hearing. That's what I was campaigning on. I didn't run on my identity, but my identity was not a secret. And in a state where 2/3 of the voters are in the Philadelphia media market, with a trans candidate on the ballot statewide, that candidate not only performed on par with other Democrats, but had the highest percentage of any Democrat running for major statewide office in Delaware this cycle. And so I think what we have to all recognize here is that when a politician tries to take an issue that impacts a handful of people in a handful of states and turn it into the most important issue in an election, everyone has to ask why. And the answer to that question is that Donald Trump was trying to divide and distract from the fact that he has absolutely no policy solutions for the issues that are actually keeping voters up at night, the issues that I was hearing about on the campaign trail. And I think we have to be crystal clear as we move forward that we are going to call out the hypocrisy of Donald Trump, of disingenuously claiming that he is a fighter for working people when his agenda is pro-higher cost.
Yes to all of that. She gets cut off there. Sorry about that. But I thought that was great. Sounds like a very smart person, and I would love to have someone that intelligent and that thoughtful representing me in Congress. Unfortunately, I have Mike Lawler as my congressman. Certainly would love Sarah McBride, who is a trans woman. And guess what? I don't care. I think it's great. Love it. Good for her. I should get her on the show. And I want to share this with you. This is the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs. It's Mark Milley answering a question at the National Security Innovation Forum about this controversy of having women serve in combat. Here is Mark Milley's thoughts on that. Or is it here are Mark Milley? I think I meant to say here are Mark Milley. You know what I meant.
Don't lecture me about women in combat. Women have been in combat, and it doesn't matter if that 7.62 hits you in the chest. No one gives a if it's a woman or a guy who pulled that trigger. You're still dead. So if you meet the standards, our military must be and always should be a standards-based, merit-based military, period, full stop. It doesn't matter if you're white, if you're black, if you're a man, if you're a woman, if you're a Catholic, if you're a Protestant. None of those identification things matter. What matters are standards, readiness standards. Do you meet the standard or not? If yes, pass go, collect 200, join the infantry. Don't lecture me about women in combat.
There you go. Mark Milley. Don't lecture him about women in combat. He didn't say it twice. I just started playing again. All right, here's the most important thing that took place in all of cable news yesterday. It's my appearance on Laura Coates Live last night with Carrie Champion. This is the segment I did after the Hangout wrapped. Hey, guy never stops working over here. No, I did. I got some rest, and the show is up late as a result of it. But here we are. Last night, we took on the hard-hitting issues of Jaguar's new ad that doesn't include any cars, and people on the right are very upset about it. Elon Musk being the leading one. Of course, he makes cars for a living, and others as well. Also, it included a whole bunch of people of color in it. And then we also talked about LeBron James wanting to take a break from social media. It's the very last segment, so it's the least kind of important, but still trending issues, if you will. And always fun to be on with my good friend Laura. And Carrie Champion is brilliant. So here it is.
I'll begin with you, Pete, who's smiling in such a odd way. You must have an opinion. Is this Bud Light 2.0?
I mean, I'm not sure. I just know that as an affluent white man, this ad made me feel unseen. I'm not sure who they think they're selling their high-end automobiles to, if not me. I'm deeply offended. I wasn't sure of the gender of some of these people, and I'm really worried about their brand going forward.
Carrie, do you feel badly for the affluent white man that's on the screen right now named Pete Dominic?
Well, I can only speak for myself as an affluent black woman, and I definitely have zero problem with that commercial, because if we're getting our criticism from X, we're in trouble. That is a deeply dark space called social media. And if we care about what most people think about on social media, we're in trouble. Now, I'd like to say this, coming from the world of sports. How many times have you seen Nike do an ad with sneakers? Anybody complaining? Now look around. Nobody's complaining. They're all athletes, right? With all different backgrounds, all colors and shapes and sizes. Here's my point. If we run everything through X, or formerly known as Twitter, we are in trouble. That place is not the litmus test for most sane Americans.
Or litmus test for anything. I know you were being facetious, by the way, Pete Dominic, just so we're clear. I got the humor. I did see it. Carrie did too. But I mean, it's a perfect segue she just gave me on the area of sports, because LeBron James is taking a break from social media, saying amen to a post from sports agent Rick Kleiman, who argues that sports media only covers sports, quote, through negative takes. Carrie, what's going on here with LeBron? Why is he doing it? And now why? Why this time?
You know what? Here's a couple of things about LeBron that I don't think people take into consideration. He's taken many breaks from social media, especially when early on, when he was trying to win his very first chip. You remember that when he was in Miami. I do believe the reason why he's taking a break now, because for someone for so long who has been in the public eye since he was a teenager, now 40 years old, he's exhausted. How long can you be criticized consistently day in and day out? First, it was his decision when he went to Miami, huge criticism. I can go back even before that, but I'll start there at the monumental moment. And then when he was very vocal and he spoke out about politics and what he believes, lots of criticism, which came up with the shut up and dribble of it all. And then most recently, his son. His son is now playing in the league. League, be it first in the pros for a while. There's criticism as to him being the dad that forced the Lakers' hand. I'm exhausted too. I just want to do my job. I mean, he's at 40 years old. He's in his last season. He's like, okay, I don't even know if it's his last season. Check me for that. I mean, he's in the last legs of his career, and he is tired. And I understand that. And you deserve whatever break you need, because as I said before, that place is a cesspool, and it's unfortunate.
Well, Pete, you're nodding along. I want you to respond to what Stephen A. Smith said today. Listen.
How did you become successful? It wasn't just playing. It was learning to feed off of the narrative to build your own brand. I don't want to hear that nonsense from them. Who the hell y'all think y'all talking to with your hypocritical asses? You ain't getting away with that. You feed off of this. You profited off of this. Play basketball, handle your business, save the lecture for other people when you fed off of it all of these years.
What's your response, Pete? Does he have a point at all?
No. I mean, listen, LeBron James is one of the most influential Americans of our generation, period, full stop. He is a role model. He understands how much of a role model he is. I read into this and any behavior from someone as respected as he is by so many Americans as I'm going to show you how to be. Social media is unhealthy. Everybody has an opinion. Be a good person. Don't listen to these haters, no matter who you are. I mean, LeBron James knows exactly what he's doing. I grew up idolizing, in the NBA at least, Michael Jordan. We all did. But Michael Jordan never really took a stance. He infamously, in my opinion, said, you know what? Republicans buy shoes too. LeBron James didn't copy his idol. He has spoken out. He has been brave. He's a role model for so many Americans, including young white Americans. But every young white person, or every person, I should say, who uses social media is learning from his role model. I mean, I just don't buy those kinds of criticisms. This guy can do whatever he wants. And he's been almost pitch perfect throughout his career. So I think it's a great role modeling behavior for all of us. We should all get off social media.
Well, I'm not getting off social media. I immediately decided I'm not taking my own advice. Back here on the podcast, we've just left CNN, that segment, in case you're confused. But I'm definitely cutting down on it and using it differently. I should have said that. I made a more nuanced point. But there you go. 5 minutes on CNN with the great Laura Coates and the great Carrie Champion. That was a lot of fun. Hopefully you like that, but now it's time to get to my conversation with Greg Proops. You're going to love this. In my view, in my opinion, Greg Proops is simply one of the greatest comedians of his generation, if not all time. The guy can absolutely do anything, and I love him. He's always been cool to me, and we don't know each other that well, but he used to come by the old show, especially when I was on the comedy channels at SiriusXM. He has a new stand-up album. You should go stream it. Go get it. Purple Shasta Raccoon. Taped in Northern California last year. He's going to be taping another one on New Year's Eve. This guy never stops. Of course, he's one of the stars of Whose Line Is It Anyway? And he's on tour with them. Absolutely. If you get the opportunity to see him live in your town, take that opportunity. Follow Greg on all the social medias, and to learn more about him, go to gregproops.com and listen to the podcast that he does with his wife as well. It's called The Smartest Man in the World. Real good. Let's do it right now with the great Greg Proops.
Oops, the Proop Dog. Look at this. How lucky are we? Very excited to have Greg Proops right here on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining me and letting me tape our conversation. I hope it's good.
I'm very pleased to be here, Pete. Thank you for having me. I'm, of course, as you can see, in front of a beautiful sunset.
Yeah, I think you might be in a hotel room and that might be a backdrop.
I'm at my house in L.A., but I don't want anyone to see it because there's stacks of firearms and drugs everywhere. I live like a Sicario. So
why do you stack all your guns? I was always wondering why you stack them that way. It doesn't seem like the best way.
You know what? I like to be organized. If I have to look for a gun and be like, where's my AK? Where's my
It doesn't work.
Whatever.
You're the master of improv, and I called out the flaw because he doesn't have any guns because he would never stack them. That's how you know that's not true. You don't stack your guns. You don't have any guns, or else you would know not to stack them, I think.
Oh, the thing is, I used to have them hanging from different lanyards around the house and from filials.
Because you could just be running through any room at any point and need to fire on somebody or something.
You know how it is. I live my life like Scarface. At any moment they might come, and I don't know who they're going to be, the Federales or like just enemies of the Proop.
Now it'll increasingly be the Federales. You've got to have a target on you. You must have made some enemies over your career, over your time, calling people.
Only everyone in show business that books shows. Those are the only enemies I have.
That's it, though?
Only anyone who has any power to give an hour-long special to an aging comedian. Those are the people who evidently have a blood feud with me.
Have you ever burnt a bridge and felt bad about it?
Oh, I'm certain I have. And a lot of times unintentionally, I think, over the years in show business. Certainly in my callow 30s and 40s, I was a little more honest and frank than I am now. How do you mean, Greg? I would never tell anyone what I think of them now. Whereas I was a little more invested in actually calling people out on their show business lies. Once, I remember I was in Scotland, and this is how long ago it was and how unimportant this is. There was a TV show that Paul Provenza was doing called Comics Only.
Yeah, I remember that with Paul. Yeah, I know.
Yeah. And I remember being there, and I was in my 30s, and someone said to me, we tried to get you on that show. Just casually lying. And I went, no, you didn't. I'm fucking available and you know where I am. And you didn't try at all. Right. And I thought, even at the time, what was the point of that?
I actually,
why did I do that? Did it really make everything right?
I think there is a reason to do that. It's to cut through. I used to do that a lot. And I had an executive at SiriusXM where I was moving up the ranks saying, He said to me, people don't like to bullshit you. I was like, what are you talking about? He goes, well, you call people on their bullshit so people don't do it as much. I was like, that seems like a good outcome to me. Because if you don't want to do the thing or go with my idea, whatever, or don't like kiss my ass and tell me something, like don't bullshit me, because I'll come up to you and say, hey, it feels like that thing is never going to happen and you just said it. And so that it feels like sometimes if you operate that way, you're more likely to deal with honest brokers and less likely to have to be strung along on something. And maybe it's a good outcome and a good attribute. I don't know.
I think it is. Part of the reason my wife and I always talk about this is that we like and love and respect each other, is that there's not a lot of bullshit. And the one thing I remember saying to my manager when I first got with him years ago was, let's just not bullshit each other. You know what I mean? If it's sucking and it's awful, just I'm a grown up, I'll deal. One thing you learn, of course, in show business over the years, Pete, is that there's an enormous cadre of people who want you to fail and don't like you at all. And that's okay. That's just part of the world, you know, and that people will lie to you. And like the other day, I was turned down for an interview about my new album. And the reason that was given was there was too much profanity and that they don't talk about politics. And I'm not going to say who it was, National Public Radio, but the idea that too much politics is an issue right now. So
well, they're looking for
what am I supposed to do?
They're looking for laughs without all the important issues being discussed. Just some
without all the insight and
I listened to your new album, and I did get triggered and offended at one point. Almost fast forwarded because you attacked David Bowie, not David Bowie, the Bowie hero. Who is that? Of the Alamo.
Jim Bowie.
You attacked Jim Bowie and you did a bit and made him seem like David Bowie. But you went after Jim Bowie and all those who held the stand at the Alamo, and I got offended by that.
Oh, good. That was my intention. Years ago, I was doing South by Southwest, which can be fun, but also can be maybe one of the big, what do they call them on the internet now? Brunch lords. It can be one of the big tech douchey brunch lord events. And I was doing my little podcast there, and I went into this big spiel about how the legend of the Alamo is that they were somehow freedom was involved, when the absolute point of the Alamo was that Texas was a slave state, and Mexico had owned Texas at the time, and Mexico had abolished slavery, and they were fucking mad about it, and they were going to stand the Mexicans down, even if it meant 100 guys in a mission for 2 weeks against 10,000 crack Mexican troops. And the crowd got really mad at me. They were genuinely angry that I impugned Texas history, which is, of course, as fictional as any white people history. Almost all white people history you'll find is hilariously not attached to reality in any way, like Columbus discovering places where people lived and stuff.
You have a hilarious, brilliant bit on your new album, which is worth listening to it just for this one, titled A World of White Indignation. And you really capture it in the most hilarious way, but you always do. And you talk about this, whether you're being funny or giving a serious commentary on it. It's a really important thing to be doing, I think, for white people to be doing. We need to be talking this way, but a lot of people don't like it. That's for damn sure. A lot of white people have their feelings hurt about it. And what do you think about that? What do you say to them? Are you sensitive about their feelings?
This was the discussion my wife and I were having before I got on with you, Pete, because yesterday I did an interview where I really laid into white people, and she's, maybe you could couch it with some humor, Greg. That way white people will want to speak to you for the rest of your life. Because, Pete, they get so... Yeah. If there's one thing white people detest, it's being called out for their whiteness and for their white privilege. They don't want to admit it. And mind you, I'm from San Carlos, California, the whitest place on earth, home of the Plain Yogurt Festival. Take the fruit out, the powerful taste is on our tongues. And you have to really couch it with white people and do funny voices and stuff, which is why I do these are great moments in white history where white people failed once again, and yet they celebrate themselves. Then they'll laugh with me.
Yes.
I remember playing in Missouri after Ferguson happened and doing a joke about the police there and how it was one of the most important jobs they had was to kill the poor at the behest of the rich. And the crowd did not find that humorous in any way. And I thought, here we are in Missouri, and this is all happening around you, but you don't want to hear it. And so I think a spoonful of sugar, as Julie Andrews once suggested.
I feel like
No, I don't care about their feelings. On the other hand, I want them to buy the album and I want them to come to my shows and listen to me. And the way you do that is by doing funny voices. Like she always says, what would Robin Williams or Jonathan Winters do? They would pretend to be a fascist by doing a hilarious fascist character.
Yes, that's good advice. It is. But if we take it outside the realm of that reason, your wife is smart to say it. I've had plenty of people say that to me, type of thing to me as well. But I have realized in the past couple of years, because of my own personal struggles, that when someone says, I don't care about your feelings, or we talk about white people and their feelings this way, what it does, it dismisses that we, in this case, as white men, struggle and suffer. And we do struggle a lot, and we suffer a lot, and we disproportionately are addicts and kill ourselves. Like black poor people men don't kill themselves like we do. They kill other people, each other, but not themselves. They don't. It's different. And that's true of every ethnicity. And so what do you say about your own? Do you ever have any kind of quarter for or conscience of your own and other white men do suffer? We do get depressed. We do feel aimless, purposeless, and especially lonely. What do you say to them? Because I feel like increasingly, this is where I've changed my thinking. I don't want to disregard your suffering, but I do want to explain your suffering and your difference isn't because necessarily of your whiteness, but as a result of it. Because I had shit so good, and when it started to go bad, I had no resilience because I've always had shit so good. Something like that? Anything?
I think you're absolutely right, Pete. And I think that cuts to the point immediately. When things go terrible for us, and they do, and yes, I'm a depressive person, and I've always suffered from depression, and I'm a white guy, and I've had every advantage. I really can't complain. No one's kept me from doing anything other than myself. And yes, I do have some sympathy for, I'm related to a lot of white people, and I'm friends with white people. And so I have some insight into their hideous dark underside, which is that they abuse drugs and alcohol, and that they feel like when the rug is pulled out from under them and they can't skate anymore and they're called on stuff, that's when it really hits home for white people that maybe they should have done something more with their emotional and intellectual lives other than just try to skate and whatnot. But yes, I do. Also, I'm not one of those people who hates every red state and goes, oh, fuck Alabama and never go there and boycott. I think that's nonsense. I think that there's really beautiful people in every single, I travel to every state, as I'm sure you used to or did. And I find that there's beautiful people everywhere. I agree. And that they do have something to say and that they do have their own pain. James Baldwin said, one of the reasons why people hang on to their petty grievances, he didn't put it this way, I'm terribly misquoting a genius. I believe he said their prejudices, is because in order to set them down, they'd have to deal with their pain. And that's too overwhelming of a prospect. And I think that's where a lot of white people are coming from. They're, as you were saying, really holding on to a lot of pain and self-loathing. And in order for them to deal with that, they victimize other people and or create these pretend scenarios where it's a trans person or it's an immigrant. Or I think I said on the album, you can ask a white person how we're going to solve a problem and they'll say it's in the Bible or some fictional thing, that it's never in the world, that there's always some abstract reason that's going to come swooping in and help you. And that's the problem white people, I think, have is their answers are never right in front of them. They're always some sort of oblique nonsense. And I think that's where white people get confused. They don't see the world pragmatically. For instance, a black woman looked at the last election, went, there's a bunch of disinformation, I'm going to vote this way. And white men looked at all the information and went, yeah, I need this protection. And so that's a very long-winded answer and didn't even really address your point. I do have some sympathy, but I also feel like white people have to own their whiteness and the fact that just because we're white and we invented whiteness and there's this giant construct that supports whiteness all the time, and the people that can't see that, that rubs me. That's a complete issue for me. Like the fact that he's president and that he's appointing all these predators into the cabinet, even though one got shot down today, that's whiteness. If you can't understand it in any other way, understand that's what whiteness gives you, that advantage, that someone who's attacked the Capitol, has 34 felony convictions, is an avowed abuser, serial abuser of women, that they have all this power. I don't know how other to explain it to you. And this is exactly what my wife told me not to do.
I like it. We can have as much fun, or I really have mostly serious conversations here with jokes interspersed whenever possible. Yeah. But I think you're a super thoughtful guy. You and I did Nagin's podcast here today, and I always love doing her show, and I love her. But when I found out you were going to be on it, I was like, oh man, this is a huge bonus. Which is then, I was so excited to have you here just to have a conversation, because I think you're such a deeply thoughtful, honest, vulnerable, hilarious guy, and in my mind, a legend in the world of comedy and the arts in general, really, and an important thinker. By the way, I looked up that quote that you mentioned, James Baldwin. The exact quote is, I imagine one of the reasons people cling to their hate so stubbornly is because they sense once hate is gone, they will be forced to deal with the pain. Whew, is a deep cut.
Yep. And he's right. I can look at my family and listen to the weird things they say and the stuff they come up with. And then I think, this is about you. You've externalized it. They're worried about fentanyl being brought over the border. I'm not certain why. That's an issue, but yes, that's an issue. And to me, it's like you're not dealing with your own pain of that, your own addictions, your own demons.
I want to ask you, the one thing I know I wanted to ask you about, I went back to prepare. Of course, I listened to your new album and I did some Wikipedia, make sure I knew everything that you've ever done. And I went back and I listened to your conversation with Mark Maron from maybe a couple of years ago. I don't know when the last one you had. I'm sure you had many. But it's really interesting to hear the two of you talking, because you are peers. You're a little bit older than him and a little bit further ahead of him. But I think of George Carlin and Bill Hicks. I think of you and Mark. I think of all kinds of women comedians as well, like Tig Notaro, or deeply thoughtful people who talk a lot about politics, people who speak truth to power. And we can name several others that both you and I know and people have never heard of. But then there's a whole other class of comedians that just do observational humor. It's not controversial. They're not speaking the truth to power, and that's fine. However you want to make people laugh has always been fine with me. But you and Mark had this really interesting conversation about how the shift went, I think you brought it up, from you and him being the kind of king of that style of thought leaders, of other people trying to be like you guys, to this, I don't know how you name it, but new breed of certainly male comedians that are not as thoughtful. I'll just start that way. They're just not as thoughtful. They're not speaking truth to power. They want to be in power, it would seem. And I wonder if you could pick it up there from what you and Mark were talking about and what I'm trying to say, how you describe yourself and identify in the genre that you came up on and helped create, were a pioneer of in many ways, and those who have followed behind you, like me and others who haven't quite, maybe we try to be like you. It seemed, I think you said it, or he said it, did we lose? Something like that. It was, did we lose? It was really interesting. Did we lose?
Yeah, I remember that. And also, what did we do it for and all that? Try to have some sort of humanist tack to your satire, and then watch humanism go completely by the wayside as a comedic stance, and get into this whole crowd cheering Nuremberg. We all agree with you, white overlord comedy thing. I don't know. We lost. I think you're
still doing really well, and there's a huge audience for so many guys that are in your lane, and you, of course. But so it's not by that lost the maybe higher ground or moral ground, or
I think we lost the focus of the media and the social media, and I think the social media has proven over the last 9 years, and the mainstream media, that they're there for the sensation and clicks and chaos and nonsense and, oh my God, I can't believe he said that. And Mr. Hinchcliffe's set at the Madison Square Garden. People will never stop talking about that. Whereas you and I have seen that set in 1,000 clubs over the last million years. It's nothing new. It's as hacky. When I started in the early 80s in San Francisco, there were 200 comedians that were all doing that exact material. Chinese people can't drive. Gay guys do this. Women are bitches. My girlfriend's so fat. So it's not like he was reinventing the wheel.
I did all those bits myself, by the way. That's one of my set lists.
I was going to say, I saw your set list from 1994. And
that was it. That was what you were reading?
I also noticed corn and then in brackets rap.
That's
so
me. That would be me.
Yeah.
So it's shifted from, you've seen that, and the point is, where are we at now with that? It gets a tremendous amount of attention. It wins on the meritocracy that social media creates, I guess. the flatter ground?
I don't know. I think it does. And I also think that the people who are the guardians of comedy and the people who ran clubs in this country didn't do anyone a big favor. Someone like Tig Notaro or Margaret Cho or a million people you can think of, like you said, Jen Kirkman, Wanda Sykes, they don't really get pushed forward. And when you turn on Netflix, you see a bunch of mainstream schlocky type things, and they would rather lose with something not edgy than put on something that's honest and forthright and, like you say, speaks truth to power. And that's my disappointment with comedy or whatever. I don't really sit around and ruminate on it as much as fume and fulminate in the dark recesses of my own room about how unfair the world is. And then, of course, realizing that the world was never meant to be fair and that comedy is not a meritocracy. I'm from the old school. Robin Williams was a major influence on all of the San Francisco comedians because he was intellectual and did vaudeville and dick jokes at the same time. So it imbued our worldview into this. Not that we tried to imitate him, because you couldn't imitate him. He was too fast. But behind all of that was a humanism, knowing what was right and what was wrong. And when that underpinning is gone from comedy, I think that's where you get where we are now, where it's this free-falling. I could say Rogan, but that's just the easy target. There is no morality. There's only what I think. And and what you think and what you believe might be what you think and what you believe, but it also might be just a heinous position that you're trying to defend. I always say things like, we can disagree about how much money we spend on missiles or whatever, but if you hate homosexuals and trans people, that's not a position that you thought out and is some sort of defensible position. It just makes you an asshole. And so for someone to get up and be wildly racist and then go, no, I'm not going to apologize for being wildly racist. People aren't ready for my edge. Reminds me of this comic I worked with in Chicago years ago who did a whole routine about women riding horses with their period in the commercial on TV. And then he had a video that he was selling, and the video was called Unleashed. And I was like, I didn't say to him, but my question was, at what point has society trammeled your amazing satire about women riding horses during their period on TV? I'm not sure why in the club you feel fettered by the bourgeois mores, but yet in this video you're somehow taken off the lead, and now we can really get to where you feel about the women riding horses with their period. So that's how I feel about these guys. They're not edgy and they're not new. If you want to be edgy, take on the emperor.
Right.
The emperor has no clothes. It's more dangerous and it's way more fun for everybody.
Yes. The phrase speak truth to power gets used way too often in terms of comedy and other genres of life, I suppose. Take on the emperor. Punch up is another one that's pretty well worn and doesn't work a lot. But what you're saying is like targeting. I said this at a board meeting where we have real drama in my town and everybody's scared to speak up, but I'm like, I've already done it everywhere. Might as well. I'm good at it. And my whole argument was, you are making the victims the aggressors. It's who does that? It's the weakest thing I've ever heard. First, you picked on black people. There's 10. There's more than that, but they don't create any smoke. As when there's not that many black people, they don't want any problems. They just want to live here and go to school. And then it was gay people. And how are they threatening you? And trans people. And I said, next year, you're going to go after disabled kids. Watch. You're going to go after disabled kids. And so the idea of targeting, what I'm hearing you saying, is like this idea of this genre of comedians and other powerful people in media, especially on the right, targeting weak people or people who are marginalized or have less advantage or opportunity is not brave. It's not tough. It's not edgy. That's what I'm hearing you say. That's the thing that's flipped it. Is that what you mean?
It is. We've reached this weird sort of recalibration point. I was promised in the early 70s a Richard Pryor, Lily Tomlin world where we were going to all of a sudden respect Indians, gay rights, this, that. We were going to have equal rights and things like that. And then that all got squashed, of course, during the Reagan era. And then now we're at this complete reactionary moment where at once, and this is the part where I won't let the team down, my optimism is not, I have a Joe Biden-esque amount of optimism. We have a black woman in the White House right now, and we have a black woman on the Supreme Court right now. And if people can't get their head around that and how bloody important that is, 2 black women were just elected to the Senate. That's never happened. We've never had that many black women in the Senate. So let's look at the gains. There are Asian people in power. There are gay people in power. They were not at the table when I was a little kid, Pete. So all the shock jock comedians and shit right-wing podcasters and all that, they can put their hands up and try to put the brakes on as much as they fucking want. Time moves forward. And if you don't believe me, like just what I said, first of all, there were never 3 women on the Supreme Court when I was a little kid. That wasn't going to happen. And I'm old. I'm in my 60s, but in the 70s, that just didn't materialize. And now we have it, and it's normal. If you go to visit military bases and stuff, you will see women commanding officers everywhere. And a very mixed military. The military is not a bunch of white guys. And that's an improvement. So it's all retro, in my opinion, this whole taking it back and making it better and all that jazz. The truth is it got better. It got better. There are less poor people. There are more people in power with more voices. It sounds like there are gay people on television. That wasn't going to happen 30, 40 years ago. And now it's happened. So they can't put the water back they can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. That's why this whole pretend thing yesterday about the trans bathrooms and everything, it's, as they say in the movie Lawrence of Arabia, it's a sideshow of a sideshow because there's no reality to it whatsoever and no one actually really cares. And as much as I support trans rights, the amount of trans people that a person's going to run into in the Senate bathroom in a day is fairly minimal.
See, this is where I disagree with you, and I think that you will see my point and concede, which is nobody really cares until they start telling you, because in my town, nobody cared. Greg, in my town, no student, not one student in all of the schools, it's a big town, just north of New York City, the burbs, had any issues with trans kids at all, didn't even know that they were trans kids, or did, if anything, they thought they were weird, but they just ignored them. Certainly didn't have any issues with them using the bathrooms because the trans kid generally goes in the gender neutral bathroom because they don't want any smoke either. And they don't change in front of each other these days. Remember when we were growing up, it was a real loss of innocence, a coming of age and terror moment because you might have to get naked in front of the other boys. It certainly was for me. But that doesn't happen anymore. So nobody cared, but the parents came and made up an issue and said there was an issue. And then, Greg, everyone cared, including students. Students started coming in and saying, just like Nancy Mace was last night, I don't want boys with penises in the girls' bathroom. Students were saying that. And then it became a thing. So I think you agree that nobody cares until somebody makes something up, misinforms, disinforms, and then a whole bunch of people care. And it's too late for us to react to them and be like, not true, didn't tell. It's already out. The toothpaste is out. But I would also add, it sounds like you still subscribe to the view, and I think I do too. The arc of moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. MLK said it. Obama made it more popular. And James Baldwin, another quote that I sent to my daughters this morning. I can't be a pessimist because I am alive. To be a pessimist means you have agreed that human life is an academic matter. So I'm forced to be an optimist. I'm forced to believe that we can survive whatever. We must survive. But Greg Proops, both those quotes are now in question because of fascism. And if it takes away our ability to communicate and free speech and to broadcast, and they're targeting people and we're all scared, we've seen this in history before and we know what happens. So I do have some concern about that.
Oh, certainly. And yes, I do concede your point. People don't care until they do care, and they're fomented into the fictional world that Republicans live in, where literally every real concern they have is fictional. Nobody cared about Haitians eating cats and dogs. Nobody cared about it. Nobody thought about it. And then all of a sudden they were shutting schools down for bomb scares. And it wasn't a thing happening. Nobody cared about the election being lost because until Trump said it was cheated. And then a bunch of guys went to jail, which you have a hilarious bit, many references to in your new album as well. But yeah, sorry to interrupt you a couple times. No, I just agree.
Was coloring the point.
No, I think you're right. And I think it's not succumbing to the depression now of knowing that in 3 months' time, basically they're going to have the ball and do whatever they want and that they could stomp all over us and all that jazz. I'm not of the school that Biden should all of a sudden run lawless and go crazy because he can. I think we had our chance to make that point, and it was called the election. And if you wanted the side of good to win, you would have voted for them. The 90 million people that sat this one out, to me, remind me of my joke. I don't know if it's on the album or not, but you really can't get white people to be interested in anything except betting on football. White people are absolutely abrogated themselves of every responsibility and any societal responsibility. You're not supposed to wear a mask because it inconveniences me. You're not supposed to get vaccinated because I'm doing my own research. And as someone said the other day, how come everyone who does their own research is terrible at their own research? So yeah, it's a fictional reality thingy that we're living in. As far as fascism, we've seen it a million times. And I would say if you were a black person who was my age or older, you have already lived through all of this because you've lived through Jim Crow and you've lived through literally not being able to eat at a counter with other people or go on a bus with other people or vote because they were. And even if you're a black person who didn't live through it, you have somebody who did, who's telling you, which is why. Do you know Bruce, comedian? Mm-hmm. He told me after 9/11, I'll never forget it. It was at Sirius. We were live on the air, and it was like a few years, maybe a couple of years. And I said something about 9/11 and being terrified of terrorism. He just started laughing out loud. Mm-hmm. He said, I love watching how afraid white people are for the first time. Yeah. That's exactly what you're saying. We've lived through this, and if you didn't live through this, you've heard about it. And so it's a different kind of impact to those people versus those of us who have less resilience because of how amazing running through the fields has been. Yeah, no, I know. And then I remember Paul Mooney. I was doing an interview with him in 2008, and he was talking about being shook down at security. And he said in his own fantastic Paul Mooney way, the problem is you aren't used to being treated like black people. Where's your ID? Take off your shoes. Who are you going to see? Who are your friends? Take off your belt. And he goes, you're not ready for that. You're not ready. And then my friend Warren Thomas, who passed away, but was a genius comedian, said to me after 9/11, I'm excited, Greg, because black people are Americans again. I heard when I think about the white people panicking now and the chattering class that I belong to, the chattering class of liberal do-gooder white people, of which I am a member, and you can find me on Blue Sky being one of those people. We get very upset over things and think, oh my God, the whole future's fucked. And then you only have to remember back, to me, that anyone who's not a white person has already gone through a lot of this, and that this government is no different to them than any government that's ever existed in the United States, save maybe 3 presidents. Yeah. And in my lifetime, those presidents would be Johnson, Kennedy, Johnson, Carter, who was completely ineffective as a president, by the way. He wasn't, I'm old enough to remember, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, and Joe Biden. That's it. Literally every other president that's been president of the United States has been an avowed, insane racist. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that. Nixon ran on white backlash. Reagan ran on white backlash. H.W. ran on white backlash. W, as you recall, it's either the us or them, I believe he said at one point. And we knew who them was. He meant Muslims and anyone different. So it's not like a big shift for a lot of people. For white people, I did a joke on an album from 2018 where I said, things have gotten so bad during Orange 45 that white people have noticed. You know, and now white people are in a tizzy because we didn't show up again. We let the country down, and now everyone's in a tizzy. Oh my God. So very briefly, I was in Germany years ago doing a documentary with Drew. We were there for the World Cup in 2006. Drew Carey, your good friend, Drew Carey. You guys must be good friends. Who went from being a pretend libertarian, because there are no real libertarians. Right. Libertarians are like ugly dudes in a room. Republicans who don't want to pay taxes. And also that whole libertarian thing of we don't need a government. What? Yeah, is there anything really stupider than that notion? It's like saying we don't need civilization. Yeah, no, I don't want underwear. I want to fight for food on the street. We were in Germany and we went to a winery as part of this. Drew didn't go that day. And it was a champagnery called the Kupfenberg champagnery. And it's in Mainz. And Mainz is where the Rhine is. And the Rhine was the absolute border of the Roman Empire. The Romans stopped at Mainz. And then after that, the hairy people, like in the movie Gladiator, the first one, when they fight the hairy people in the first battle. And he took us downstairs. We were met there by the Baron von Kupfenberg, who was in his 90s. This is 2006, so he's probably quite dead. He was about 93. He had a British accent. That's how effete he was. He spoke English with a British accent, which means he had gone to school in London, most certainly in the 30s. And he took us on this tour, and the winery was astonishing. There were Louis Comfort Tiffany lamps that Louis Comfort Tiffany had made for his great-grandfather that had Kupfenberg. The logo was champagne glass inverted. So it was a K, right? But it was like that. So he took us downstairs, and it was 8 stories deep. And he went, the Romans built this. And I said, Baron, the Romans? And he went, the Germans built this. And the Romans kicked their ass and made them fucking build this, right? 8 stories down. So by the time you get to the 5th or 6th story, it was absolutely freezing. The champagne was kept at an icy temperature on little wooden racks where the cork was wet all the time, so that they were slanted. So then now we're upstairs, and the Baron says, every woman should be given a glass of champagne at 11 o'clock in the morning. And I said, that's indisputable and undeniable fact, Baron. Then he says to my wife, what's your husband's name? And she says, Proops. And he goes, I knew many Proops before the war.
What? Wow.
So we were Jews, and we were in Germany. And before the war, oh my God, it was so much fun with the jokes and everything. And then after the war, there wasn't as many.
Anytime you encounter that perspective from someone who lived through it, must be chilling and just so, I don't know how to describe how that must have felt.
Well, I tell it to people now because I want them to understand what we're looking at for the next 4 years here. It's all fun and games until you're clearing a road with a bunch of people from your group. And you've all got logos on your shoulders. So
God, I hope I'm in the.
I'm not trying to panic everybody. I don't think it's going to happen. I'm hoping. I know that this country's been through worse things than this asshole. So if you were alive in the 1850s, you would feel the same way that we do now. If you were alive in the 1880s, when Reconstruction stopped, they put in a Democratic president. He instigated Jim Crow. All the federal troops were pulled from the South. How many times have we gone through this? America's in a big. It just feels. Our original sin will never escape us. And I don't want to make that Roman Empire analogy because I think it's faulty. The Romans, they thought their original sin was Carthage. Because when they finally beat the Carthaginians, who were Africans, they sowed the ground with salt and they leveled the town. And they knew they shouldn't have done it. They knew they should have let them live because they were a society. And they didn't. And our original sin is trying to commit genocide on the Indians and black people. And we're going to pay for it forever.
Is it true that when you go on tour in red states, on the way out, you salt the ground? That's what I heard about you.
I do. I use pork cracklings, and I have this little recipe for a deep fried lard puff that I do that my grandmother gave me.
Oh, wow. That seems nice. The last thing I wanted to ask you real bad, I know I want to talk with you about, is gender and masculinity and men and boys, which is something I'm very interested in. Someone, a thoughtful listener corrected me and said, I said several times that I'm obsessed with men and boys. What I mean by that is not that I'm obsessed with men and boys, but I'm obsessed with their role in society today and what is changing. And you have, I'm sure, a unique perspective on this because everybody has always thought that you might be gay and that you have these feminine qualities. They've thought that about, I've gotten that my whole life as well, but you're a very famous guy and you have these different affects, but you're not gay. You've never been gay and you grew up in Northern California. And my guess is it's not something you thought about a tremendous amount or think about a lot. But what I'm finding is it's like a top issue with a huge percentage of American men to be thought of in a certain way, in a certain traditional masculinity. I don't love the phrase toxic masculinity because I think people see it coming. But I wonder how you think, Greg Proops, specifically about that issue, given who you've been your whole career as a really well-known, famous stand-up comedian. I equate you to a certain extent, and it's for real. Like you're a rock star of comedy in a lot of ways because of your style and because of your career. But the rock stars of rock and roll of a certain era were very feminine and they got laid more than anyone. Like their long hair and lipstick never made them gay, nor does yours, your affect, whoever you've been. And I wonder just how your experience has been, and more importantly, how you see and talk to men and boys who might be that way, feel that way. I'm sure you come in contact with them as fans who love your comedy, or you're on a podcast and it comes up, or you're just, any thoughts on any of that? And if you think I'm inaccurate or wrong about you or society or culture, please, by all means, tell me.
No, not at all, Pete. I think you're astute. And part of the reason I was so excited to do your show after we chatted on Nagin's show was, excuse me, the fact that you're a considered person who thinks about what you say. And I appreciate your compliments. I really do. And you're absolutely right. I've had people say, are you gay my whole career? And because I have a lisp and I talk this way and I don't particularly butch it up. And I've said on my podcast for years, I'm not straight and I make no case for it. I mean, I'm not gay. See what I just did? I'm not gay and I make no case for it. I love musicals and I love Liza Minnelli and I'm going to wear a leopard jacket. It doesn't bother me because I know I'm not gay, but people get real touchy about roles. And yes, I have talked to lots of people over the years, especially at the podcast, about men and how they should act and what they. And my insistence with men is mostly try to smell good and try to look good and try to not be a complete asshole everywhere you go. And then maybe you'll find that you're a little more welcome than when you wear a baseball hat, man spread, take up a lot of room and are loud and not let other people have part of the conversation. I think there's a track on the album where I call myself an arch effeminate asshole or something, whose effeminacy rubs everyone I meet the wrong way. And I'm fairly aware of that. And I've had a couple of.
Why don't you care what other men especially think about your identity, how you are? Why don't you care about it? I know you care about what other men think of your performance, of your art, of your creativity, of your character qualities. But this one, you don't care. I don't care. Why?
Not really. It's not that important. And it's not something that I've hinged my whole identity on, or rather. Like you say, I'd rather much be rewarded for my work than for how virile or macho I am or whatever. Right. If I'm a fruit bucket and people still laugh at it, hooray for fruit bucketry. I find that guys who really overcompensate and do the baseball hat, I got to dress this way, I got to act this way thing, really make me laugh because it doesn't really play that much. And I think, as you said, the effeminate rock stars of the 70s appealed to women 1 billion times more than the macho ones because it indicated that you might actually be open to other emotional states as opposed to just chest pounding and get on top of this, baby. So there's that. I think that people's gender and their identity is fluid. And that's a real hard thing for people to get their mind around. And like you said about the school board in your town, it's not an issue till it's an issue. In general, I think people don't really go around thinking about it a lot, but when it gets thrown in their face, all of a sudden they want to be huffy about it. No one remembers, but during when W was president, he had a real problem with gay people getting married because of, I believe the phrase was the sanctity of marriage. And this is from a party that has Newt Gingrich and other people who abandoned their wives on their deathbeds, and literally a dazzling list of predators and sexual abusers. And so they're still on to us about how we're too fruity, or we what was it? They go to school in the morning and they're a boy, and then they come home and they're a girl and they're eating a cat or whatever that story was. Then they start to believe these lies and whatnot. No, I haven't really cared. And I think people need to get a grip on accepting other people for however they are and not really worrying about it that much. I don't know if that answers your question, Pete. Like I say, I'm addressing it more than I ever did before because I think it's funnier now to talk about it and just say, my name is Proops. I sound like this. I look like this. So I've had a lot to deal with.
There's something about, and what that was, however you dealt with it was through a certain set of emotions that you touched and connected with. And that's the big criticism of who we are. Like you're very feminine, you're very emotional, you're in touch with your emotions. There's an avoidance of that. And I wish we could flip it, because when you avoid your emotions, I think it's been proven in a certain randomized controlled study that they see men blow up. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's what makes men shoot everybody or lash out. You know, they all the football players who abuse them are of course awful for doing it. And by the same token, the system they've been raised in,
right?
The answer to everything since they were a kid was how much harder can you hit and how you respond to things with absolute force. And so now they're in a relationship with a woman and they haven't dealt with that before. And then they think, I'll just deal with this the way I deal with everything, which is I'll fucking lock you down and you shut up and do it my way. And then, wait a minute, I can't believe they're acting this way. You've programmed an entire group of people. And I think that's what's going on with, there's so much bullshit argument. You made the greatest argument on CNN about what happened in the election. If I have to hear one more postmortem about if only Kamala had gone on Joe Rogan, she would have won, then that kind of nonsense. But young men are being exposed to a real lethal kind of viewpoint of the world. And also the self-victimization of I feel so bad for myself because I can't get chicks. And yet you're not willing to make any concessions and or understand women at all. Imagine now you have a teenage daughter.
I have 17 and 19-year-old daughters. They're basically both adults now. Yeah,
they're adults. But so when they went back to school on Wednesday 2 weeks ago, were the men at their school gleeful and happy and high-fiving and then leaving your daughters in the bathroom crying? You know what I mean? That's what the issue we're talking about here.
Yes, it happened in my daughter's a junior in high school. She was sullen, and there was some of that. And there was certainly some of it in other schools across the country, lots of it. My other daughter is 19, and she goes to the Fashion Institute of Technology, so they all felt the same way. There was none of that there. There's no...
Not at the Fashion Institute.
It's probably the most feminine, gayest part of Chelsea, which is hard to say.
But I mean, being a 17-year-old girl and then going to school the next day and the guys are acting like nothing happened. I was in South Carolina the day of the election. And then for 2 weeks after, I was in the Deep South in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. And Gary Anthony Williams, who's someone I work with, and he's a black guy, said, this is like their fucking Super Bowl.
Yeah, for sure. To my daughter's credit, my daughter's teacher's credit, one of her teachers recognized and felt the same way. It was the day after the election, and she sent Julia a message. It was so thoughtful. She was like, are you okay? You seem different today. And she knew. She just didn't want to be political. And it was wonderful because she saw my daughter and others like her. Last question for you is I'm trying to do something different on the show, which is like this kind of more positive, inspiring, upbeat segment at the beginning. And so I want to ask you, what is it in your life? Is there a person, you mentioned Robin Williams earlier. What was your relationship with him?
We were comedy colleagues. We were friendly. I never went over to his house. I never did drugs with him, which I'm very proud of. Because you
didn't want to support you.
Huh?
Why are you proud of it?
Because I didn't want to be one of the people who was with him on binges and stuff. I was with him always in professional situations, award shows, comedy shows, improv shows, radio shows. I did an hour-long thing where we improvised together, just the two of us in front of a microphone, which I wish I had. Of course, there's things, right? With the two of us for an hour. I had just got back from Morocco. Man. It was 2001. And he started doing Moroccan characters and English characters. And I knew him for a long time. And we were always really friendly. And he called me Mr. Proops, which makes me want to cry. He didn't call me Greg. I was always, Mr. Proops. And I called him Robo. And I haven't watched 1 second of his material or any of his movies since 2014, since he died. I haven't been able to. It's not something I'm willing to reach into. I just don't want to. I remember him real well. And he was a really lovely person and off stage, quite shy. When I did a show with him in 2011, 2012, somewhere in there, a chat show at the Sketch Fest in San Francisco at a jazz club called Yoshi's. And it was me and Linda Cardellini and him and Michael Penn. And Linda Cardellini's from Wood City. I'm from San Carlos, the whitest place on earth, home of the Plain Yoga Festival. And Robin's from Mill Valley, so it was a very Bay Area. Redwood City is the city over from San Carlos. So we were all from the Bay Area, and the crowd really liked it. And backstage, Robin showed up, and I go, Robo, I don't want to introduce you because everybody knows who you are. What do you say we just bum rush the stage together? And he went, Mr. Proops, that sounds like a good idea. And then we got on stage and he never shut up for a fucking hour and a half. At one point he wrestled me to the floor.
Wow.
Like he was unpredictable, man. And not only was he quick and funny, he had, now you wouldn't say, in those days, in the old days, you'd say a Rolodex in his head. He had a computer in his head. He had extraordinary powers of recall. So he could remember anything that he'd ever learned or heard, which is why people always accused him of stealing stuff, because he would hear people do stuff in clubs and then he would repeat it. He took one of my jokes once and I was thrilled beyond measure, to be honest.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So that was my relationship with him. But I feel like he was a real big force in all of our. He gave people in San Francisco the permission to do what we used to call references and sub-references. So you were a spoiled comedian in San Francisco in those days, and Marin will back me up on that. The leeway in San Francisco was such that you could go really deep and obscure with the crowd, and they would stay with you. And then you'd go on the road and be in Nebraska or Texas, and you would die on your ass, because the crowd wasn't nearly as supportive of being obscure and arcane and inside as the San Francisco crowds were in those days. Right. Which is why you have a whole group of people from San Francisco that are still out there performing, and even the younger ones, and all of us have the same ethos. And then there's a bunch that came through San Francisco that were honorary San Franciscans. I don't mean like Paula Poundstone and Kevin Meaney, who are absolutely from other places, but were very much San Francisco comics, or Bobcat Goldthwait, or Tom Kinney, or Paul Kozlowski, or Jen Spencer, or whatever, but also Janine Garofalo, Doug Benson, David Cross. They all came through San Francisco and were bathed in our poison. And so I like to think that they were influenced a little bit by it too. And it's that I am allowed to be as intellectual as I want to be. I'm allowed to talk about everything I want to talk about. And at the same time, I'm absolutely going to do dick jokes and vaudeville.
Which is the rules that I love so much. And you've supported them and carried them out. I hope you never die. Keep doing it. I'm so excited to connect with you and do this. And I hope that you'll come back and talk to us again, because this is just what I needed to chat with you. I really appreciate you, Greg. Thank you so much.
Pete, I can't tell you what a pleasure it was. First of all, your flattery has absolutely made my day. And because I have a lot of career and self-esteem issues as well. I think it's diabolical that I'm not huger than I am, but the world wasn't built for that. So
it's hard to know where someone thinks they should be or where they want to be, but it's easy to make assumptions and so on. But like in talking to you today, I was like, I don't know. I just figure you've done always whatever you've wanted to do. I don't know what thing you would have wanted to do more of that you didn't do or wish you were doing, but.
No, that's the thing. And that's what my wife always says to me. That's the truth of it is I actually did do everything I wanted to do and nothing that I didn't want to do. So I can't blame anyone else or blame show business or anything like that. I'm reasonably happy with where I am. And I'm super happy with being able to do improvised comedy albums and do things like that, which I never thought I'd have the chance to do as a young comic.
You're the master of it. There's almost nobody better at it, obviously. And I once years ago, he's very close with Bill Burr when we were coming up together in New York City. And I just remember asking him I'm that sap who always ask questions like, what do you want? What's your dream? What's your dream situation? And he goes, I just want to have a body of work. And I was like, oh, that's a pretty good goal, specific goal. It's a wide, and if you were measured by that, your body of work is extensive as anybody in the business. What have you not done, actually?
What did I what?
What have you not done in entertainment? In the world of comedians and actors and performers and entertainers, like you've done it all, I feel.
I guess I might have done a few more like TV type specials, I suppose. That would have been probably good if I'd had the effort and will to do that, but I didn't, so there we are. Instead, I've gone audio, which is super old school.
I love it. I love listening to your new special. I listened to it today, and it was like I felt rich because that was what I was doing to prepare for work, was listening to Purple Shasta Raccoon, which everybody needs to go stream. What do we say? Stream Spotify, Apple Podcast, buy it. Most importantly, is that how I'm plugging?
Yeah. You can go to gregproops.com or there's a link on all the social media. And you can buy it streaming. My last album's pretty funny, too, French Drug Deal. The one before that, In the City, I liked, but I feel like the last two are actually...
And are you doing another one on New Year's Eve? Is that right?
I am, and I haven't thought one moment about what I'm going to talk about.
Oh, God, you'll get there. I trust you will have enough by the time that rolls around to just go on. Thoughts on Matt Gaetz withdrawing before I let you go?
I'm surprised and delighted. Yeah. I would have thought that nothing was going to happen now, but evidently I think it's a good sign because it means that there still are bridges that are too far, even for them, because he's clearly not just a terrible choice. He's actually I think if you were going to pick the obverse or the anti-choice for Attorney General, you would have picked this insane pedophile pervert who is a danger to society in himself. And now to see him shunted aside is delightful.
Who do you think?
I'm going to try to not get caught up in the day-to-day nonsense of it. I think my general plan is to really never listen to Orange 45 or see his face again for 4 years. I'm going to stay up on the news and stuff, and I'm not going to quit fighting. I'm so not giving up on America. I'm not moving or anything. I noticed that Ellen DeGeneres and Portia were moving to England and that Eva Longoria is moving to Spain. And she said that America was dystopian. And I'm like, you're married to the guy who's like the head of a giant media agency. How is it dystopian? Dystopian means you're fighting with a rat in the garbage, right? According to sci-fi. And we all have punk haircuts because it's the future and it rains all the time. That's dystopia. That you're mildly inconvenienced that there's homeless people in Brentwood, it to me doesn't exactly scream dystopia.
I love that. I just seen this is breaking. I'll let you go. But did you see who Trump has nominated instead of Matt Gaetz?
No, crazy. Who is it? Kid Rock?
El Chapo.
Which I think surprise me. I'm surprised it's not Deputy Dog or someone he's heard of. Because with him, everything's a reference from 1962.
My first joke was Thanos. So he could just come in. No, he's nominated Josh Brolin because he thinks he's actually Thanos, and he just wants him to come in and snap and get rid of 50% of us. Get rid of Proops first. Snap. Proops just disintegrates. So good. Love talking to you. Thank you very much, Greg Proops.
Thanks, Pete Dominic.
Yeah, how about it? Greg Proops. Go let him know you heard him here on the show. Go get that new album of his, and if you get the opportunity to see him live, definitely take it. Listen to his podcast, The Smartest Man in the Room, and that is all I've got for you today. What a week it has been. I've put in a lot. I hope that you're grateful. I appreciate so many of you just signed up or upgraded your subscriptions. Write a rating review of this podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and I think those are all my messages for you bumblebees here at the end, other than hope you find peace and light and love, and the best way to do it is to try to spread that. So reach out to somebody today. How about it? If not me, standupwithpete@gmail.com. Have a good one. I'll talk to you later. John Carroll takes us in and out every day, writes all the music for the show. Grammy Award-winning singer-songwriter, founding member of the Starland Vocal Band, and our friend. Take it away, John.
Better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting right. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got